would promote my independence more. I don't see how it can. I don't know how I'm going to manage. I don't want to get upset.
Graham and Angela's care is paid for by West Lothian Council. Last November, the council publicly admitted its finances were in a mess, with an £8.1 million overspend, fuelled in part by rising social care costs. It said it needs to make savings. The Scottish Government controls social care, but we've discovered that cuts to care packages aren't just happening in Scotland, they appear to be happening across Britain too. An exclusive Sky News survey of domestic care providers across Scotland, England and Wales indicates a worrying trend of cuts to these services in the last 2 years. 83% of care providers who responded told us that their council had cut the number of care packages being paid for. Angela is now preparing meals for Graham and herself. She's doing the laundry, she's going out to do the shopping, and she's making hot drinks. Just put your hand on your heart for me. How has it been?
Terrible. I go to bed at night and that's all I can think about. I feel like I don't exist anymore. I feel if I wasn't here it wouldn't matter.
We asked West Lothian Council for an interview, but they declined, telling us a consistent and fair approach is applied when reviewing or assessing an individual's care, with any changes to a care plan being made on the basis of assessed need and not to address financial pressures. According to Age UK, more than 2.5 million older people are left struggling because they aren't getting the care that they need. It is a cruel side effect of a broken social care system, which is leaving millions suffering behind closed doors. Nick Martin, Sky News.
Well, that was Sky News at 10. Coming up, we'll take a first look at tomorrow's newspapers in the press preview. Tonight, we're joined by the political editor at The Sun, Harry Cole, and the political editor at The Guardian, Pippa Crerar. Amongst the stories, we'll be discussing tomorrow's papers marking 80 years since the liberation of Auschwitz. Do stay with us.
we've got your Sunday mornings covered. From the front page and the sounds of the streets to the voices of the people who make the major calls and big picture politics beyond Westminster. We'll put you at the heart of our story.
I'm ready. Are you?
Join me, Trevor Phillips, Sunday mornings on Sky News.
You are watching the press preview, a first look at what's on the front pages as they arrive. It's time to see what's making the headlines with the political editor of The Sun, Harry Cole, and the political editor at The Guardian, Pippa Crerar. They'll be with us from now until just before midnight. So time now to see what's making some of those front pages. Well, the Metro's front page is dedicated to the Auschwitz commemoration, with a moving picture of one of the survivors of the camp being comforted. The Mail says the survivors gathered for the last time before the gateway of death. The Express also features a picture of a former prisoner of Auschwitz, quoting King Charles, saying evil was allowed to flourish. It's the same photograph used on the front of the Mirror, where it says, "It is our duty to remember." The Telegraph features a picture of the Princess of Wales at a Holocaust memorial event. But its main story says non-crime hate laws are to be expanded. In The Times, it reports that an internal Home Office review recommends sweeping changes to how extremism is countered. And on the front of the Eye, UK banks squeeze savers again to boost their profits. The FT says the low-cost Chinese AI firm DeepSeek triggered a tumble in tech stocks by showing it could use far less computing power than Nvidia or other rivals. The Guardian says US tech stocks are in turmoil after the release of the Chinese AI chatbot. And the Daily Star also colourfully notes the turmoil on the markets, saying DeepSeek wiped millions off US tech stocks. We're joined tonight by Harry Cole and Pippa Crerar. Welcome to you both. Very sombre front pages, many of the front pages, with that 80th anniversary of the liberation of Auschwitz. So I don't know how much of the coverage you saw today, but deeply, deeply moving, and with the quotes from the King saying, you know, this evil should never, ever be allowed to happen again. Pippa.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, I watched a lot of the coverage, and many of the front pages have pictures of some of the 56 survivors, all of whom would be in their 90s, who survived their time at Auschwitz-Birkenau before it was liberated by the Red Army 80 years ago. They will have just been teenagers at the time, most of them, or younger. So a very long time ago, but some of the testimony which they told today shows just how starkly vivid those memories, those awful memories of those horrors of being in that death camp have stuck with them. And I was very struck by the dignity and the humanity and the courage of some of those individuals being able to rake back over what must have been the most the worst of worst experiences, you know, when they were stripped of their humanity in the face of the Nazis' evil. And Auschwitz-Birkenau, 1.1 million people were murdered there, and yet when the Red Army arrived, there was only 7,000 prisoners who remained. Others had obviously been marched off on death marches as the Nazis retreated west. One of the most striking books I've ever read is, well, there's two, in fact, by Primo Levi, who was the Italian Jewish author who spent a year in Auschwitz-Birkenau and then survived and lived for 40 more years, but then took his own life. One of his friends said that he died in Auschwitz, but 40 years later. And he wrote, I was reading today again, reminding myself, he wrote about how the men who arrived in Auschwitz-Birkenau cast strangely embarrassed glances at the sprawling bodies, at the battered huts, and the few of us still alive. He was in hospital himself with scarlet fever, the ill being those primarily that were left behind. They did not greet us, nor did they smile. They seemed oppressed not only by compassion, but by the feeling of guilt that such a crime could exist. And I think survivors of the Second World War, generations which have followed, people that were born like us years after the Second World War, nevertheless, I think still feel, I know I do, that sort of collective guilt that such an atrocity could take place, and really sort of brings into question humanity and how we as a people could do this. I, must have been about 10 years ago, visited Auschwitz-Birkenau, and it was one of the most profound and moving experiences of my life. And the images and the stories, crucially, that we've heard today have brought a lot of that back.
And for that very reason, many of them saying today that you must never forget, mustn't forget what happened, lest it happen again.
Obviously, 80 years is a significant landmark that's being noted, but also these 56 survivors, they're in their late 90s, some of them. This will probably be the last time that they are able to gather like this at a sort of landmark moment. And I think that's why there's been such a poignancy today in the fact that from their message of saying never forget, because it really is the last time we're going to hear from them in a scenario like this. So obviously the pictures, I mean, pretty clean sweep on the front pages. This Stanislav Zalewski, I've probably got that name wrong, but what an image there. And obviously, I mean, how serious to take it. It's the first time the head of state, king, one of our monarchs, has been there as monarch. Again, marking that particularly poignant milestone. And then, when you see pictures like this, you realise it's, we read about this in history books, we talk about it, but like this is still living history. This is still within a generation. And I think there's some quite stark and alarming polling around, kicking around in the last couple of days, of just how few people actually, when actually pushed about their knowledge of the Holocaust, actually know these stories in any detail. Of course, it is taught, but it needs to be taught more and more as these people aren't around.
And that's something
to tell these stories.
Sir Keir Starmer
touched on actually quite well. I thought he did very well today.
This needs to be spoken about in schools. It needs to be taught history, so it isn't something that then passes off into the annals of history that we forget about.
Yeah, he visited Auschwitz-Birkenau with his wife, Victoria, a couple of weeks ago. And today he was talking about how they had been in one of the buildings, I can't remember what number it was, but it was given a number, at Auschwitz, and they'd been looking through the Book of Remembrance, trying to find the names, because the Nazis were, prolific record keepers, and trying to find the names of her relatives, because she came from a Jewish family, or comes from a Jewish family, who had been at Auschwitz. So, that very sort of personal connection for the Prime Minister and his wife as well. And he has praised, as many politicians have praised, and supported financially the government for a long time, a charity called the Holocaust Educational Trust, which is the charity that I went with when I went to Auschwitz-Birkenau. And they do an amazing job. They take school children, sort of older teens generally, they take plane loads out to Poland to visit, and they spend a day there. And they visit the Auschwitz Museum, and obviously there's the testimonies are written and recounted there, but also there's the very moving images of or displays of things like shoes and hair and possessions that people arrived at Auschwitz with and were taken from them, and they're still there, all piled up. And then they take the children over to Birkenau, which was the death camp, where when I was there, it was like thigh-deep snow, very bleak day, very evocative of what it might have been like. And the remains of these wooden huts that people were stored in. I mean, I use the word deliberately because it was while they were awaiting extermination in the gas chambers, the rickety remains were still there. And actually just experiencing that and being there will teach those children more and future generations more than any history book could. So it's an incredible charity.
Harry, just to have a quick look at the Daily Telegraph, the Princess of Wales at a Holocaust Memorial Day service in London. Photograph there with a candle.
Yeah, I mean, obviously the scenes from Auschwitz itself are, dominating, but this event is being marked across the world, not least in London tonight. with the royals. I mean, everyone out on force really. It's to mark that moment. And actually, I think there has been a remarkable amount of positive, if I can use that word in a sense, coverage of the good things coming out. It has been an incredibly rough few years to be Jewish in lots of countries around the world, not least Britain. Rising anti-Semitism across Europe, the rise of the far right, the return of the far right across Europe, and frankly also, you know, closer to home. We shouldn't shy away from the fact that anti-Semitism has been on the march in this country. I think the Irish president, I think, behaved fairly disgracefully. He was asked by the Jewish community not to speak out. Not to even attend this event, given his views on Israel and his views on anti-Semitism, and yet some people still, you know, can't even take a day off, and I think that's sad. But on the whole, remarkably positive contribution from leaders and royals and the like.
OK. Harry and Pippa, thank you very much for the moment. We'll be discussing this story on the front of The Guardian next. Their headline, US tech stocks in turmoil after Chinese firm unveils AI chatbot. Do stay with us to find out more on that story.
I'm James Matthews and I'm Sky's US correspondent, based here in Washington, D.C. Do you fear a fourth indictment? Does your government owe an apology to the British home children?
Great to see you.
Does your government owe them an apology? The fact that they were intercepted, does that indicate a military weakness on the part of Iran?
No.
Free, wherever you get your news. There's no doubting the strength of this hurricane as it roars through. You can feel a devastating power. It had been a difficult night in a deadly storm.
Bang, bang. You can hear it hitting the windows.
Our houses are okay.
It's depressing.
As bad as all of this is, it could have been much worse. Today, this land they call sacred is at the heart of America's electric car revolution.
To me, it's a sacred ground.
The white gold rush is a race that Biden doesn't want to lose. I've covered some of the biggest stories in the world. Donald Trump, 45th President of the United States, it would appear is about to learn his fate.
Escort coming out!
San Quentin houses America's largest death row. They rarely allow cameras onto the condemned block.
James Matthews, Sky News. I want to be treated equally like everyone else. It's one step closer to getting out, to getting off death row.
Sky News. Get the full story first. Mr. Trump, James Matthews from Sky News.
Hey, James.
Are you diminished by claims that you're a racist?
Question?
Mr. Musk, has your ignorance and ego cost Ukrainian lives? Vladimir Putin calls you outstanding. What do you call him, sir?
He's from Sky News. He's from Sky News. He's entitled to ask me questions.
That gives you the very best of Sky News wherever you are. Breaking news, videos and analysis.
Evidence of the crisis.
Podcasts, watching us live.
I'm live in Jerusalem.
Wherever you get your podcast.
All in one place and all at just the touch of a screen. The Sky News app. Get the full story first.
We've got your Sunday mornings covered. From the front page and the sounds of the streets to the voices of the people who make the major calls and big picture politics beyond Westminster. We'll put you at the heart of our story.
I'm ready. Are you?
Join me, Trevor Phillips, Sunday mornings on Sky News.
Mandatory evacuation, you must leave.
For many people, Harvey is far from over.
People here believe the water will be this deep for weeks.
I'm Greg Milam and I'm Sky's Chief North of England correspondent.
Are you trying to run me over, Sir Philip?
No, go away.
Look like it, sir. Will you respond to those who made accusations, Sir Philip?
Can you go away?
Sky News, the full story first.
Welcome back. You are watching the press preview. Still with me, Harry and Pippa. We're going to take you through the next section of newspapers, starting off with the front page of The Guardian. And this story, US tech stocks in turmoil after Chinese firm unveils AI chatbot. This is DeepSeek, which has wiped $1 trillion off the tech stocks. So this is a new kid on the block, which has taken everyone by surprise, seemingly. This is a big deal.
It is. I mean, I'd like to say that I'm an expert in AI and also in sort of in chatbots, but I'm not. However, fortunately, we've got the newspapers to rely on.
Very good explainer in The Guardian, I have to say. Yeah.
Well, there you go.
I don't often say it, but yeah, I did read it on the way in.
Always the best explainers, obviously. But it is. But I think what's happened here is that there's a big Chinese firm, DeepSeek, which is a competitor to OpenAI and its tool that we all know and love, ChatGPT, or don't love perhaps, but they have managed to produce a alternative chatbot for, they claim, a fraction of the cost. I mean, they claim it took them 2 months and less than 5 million quid. I think some analysts have raised some eyebrows about that, and it was built using chips, albeit older ones, from NVIDIA, which is the big US firm, and also using some of Meta's architecture as well. But what has happened as a result is that it's wiped, I think it was 600 billion off the market value of NVIDIA, which is the leading US maker of computer chips, which is a record loss for any company. And more than one analyst has suggested that it's reminiscent of the day that the dot-com bubble burst with the sell-off. It might not be as extreme as that, but it is certainly the case that it's sort of become, if not an existential moment, then certainly a moment of great self-reflection for all these big US firms that pump billions and billions of investment in.
What a contrast with what a difference a week makes, eh? Because you remember last week there was the Brolyarchy, as they've been called, the big tech bosses all standing there in the rotunda behind Donald Trump as he's being inaugurated, looking like kings of the world. You had all of these, all the CEOs of these companies we're talking about. And now they're facing, a proper rough day at the office. Now, this sort of started over the weekend that this sort of Chinese firm basically showed it's working, essentially, showed what it can do. There is some scepticism about how safe it is, given that a Chinese-owned company can basically, at any time will have to surrender its data and its sort of back end to the Chinese government. So there is sort of scepticism about how much of a market share they're going to actually be able to get in the US, given the massive security concerns around them. But they have put the willies up the Silicon Valley very, very quickly today.
It will be interesting to see Donald Trump's response to this, won't it? Let's have a look at the Telegraph, a story regarding hate crimes. Non-crime hate laws set to be expanded, and previously we'd been told that they were set to be scrapped under Suella Braverman in 2023. This is a complete
There's a leaked report. It's one of those stories where I was reading it this morning, and you could have picked any line from it. There's just one of those reports. There's so much news in it, and I think lots of different papers have gone with lots of different lines. When Yvette Cooper came in, the new Home Secretary, she basically said, like, show me what's going on, lift up the bonnet. And a leaked copy of this review has come back, and it seems to be pretty sweeping in its recommendations, be it, as the Telegraph have gone with non-crime hate laws to be expanded. These are highly controversial things in the fact that you can essentially have, you can be recorded for a crime you didn't commit. That's not, sorry, you basically get a record for a crime that it isn't a crime, and it's, for highly contentious. There's also lots of sort of sweeping expansion of definitions of extremism, from using something like two-tier Keir is apparently a far-right trope now. There's lots of attacks on the manosphere of the internet, and now this is going to go down, quite badly. Depending, you can still pick and choose how you take this. The Home Office are slightly distancing themselves from their own report tonight and saying, look, this is a draft, it's leaked. But these are just recommendations. We might not take them all on, but it's going to really has put the cat amongst the pigeons.
OK, Pippa, got about 20 seconds, I'm afraid.
Yeah, no, just that the Dan Jarvis, the Security Minister, and Yvette Cooper have both rejected the reports on the wider range of extremism and expanding the non-crime hate incidents beyond Islamophobia and anti-Semitism. So those are the ones they want to stick with.
Except that terrorism rules do need rewriting, as the last week has shown.
Harry and Pippa, thank you so much. See you at the top of the hour. Coming up next on Sky News at 11, survivors take part in a ceremony to mark 80 years since the Auschwitz concentration camp was liberated.
Mandatory evacuation, you must leave!
For many people, Harvey is far from over.
People here believe the water will be this deep for weeks.
I'm Greg Milam and I'm Sky's chief North of England correspondent.
Are you trying to run me over, Sir Philip?
No, go away.
Look like it, sir. Will you respond to those who made accusations, Sir Philip?
Can you go away?
Sky News, the full story first.
I saw police being forceful, pushing young men and women to the ground as they made almost 100 arrests. Will the cold affect your voters?
Well, we have a lot of tremendous support.
Free wherever you get your news.
The people here know that worse storms may well be on their way.
I'm Martha Kellner and I'm Sky's US correspondent based here in Los Angeles.
It's 11 o'clock. This is Sky News' extended press preview. Our top story. Only 7,000 out of more than 1 million people survived death here at the hands of the Nazis. Just 56 were present today to bear witness to the horror.
All my little friends were rounded up and driven to their deaths, while the heartbreaking cries of their parents fell on deaf ears.
In the first visit of a British monarch to Auschwitz, King Charles warns of the dire risks when evil is allowed to flourish. And in the UK, major public buildings were tonight lit up in purple in tribute to the millions who lost their lives. Plus, we'll look at the Chinese AI startup that caused a nightmare on Wall Street today. Over the next hour, we'll be discussing today's news with our reviewers, Harry Cole and Pippa Crerar. And later, we'll have a full run-through of tomorrow's front pages. Good evening. 80 years ago, on this day, the Soviet Red Army arrived at the sprawling series of camps which makes up Auschwitz-Birkenau. They found survivors, just 7,000, emaciated and starving. 10 days earlier, another 60,000 had been forced to walk 60 kilometres, a death march which killed up to 15,000. These were the final days of Auschwitz, the notorious killing camp